Alright, so as you probably know already, I'm a sucker for 35mm lenses and I have plenty right here on the table. I still have a few back there on the shelves, but today we're talking about why 35mm, why for me, and why you should buy a 35mm if you don't have one already, which it's pretty unlikely. Hey, what is good everyone, Chris here, welcome back to the channel, and like I said, today we're talking about the 35mm lenses. There are all kinds of flavors, from Summicrons to Summilux to Noctons to simple 35mm lenses. There are also these kit lenses that contain a 35mm focal length in, usually a 16-55 or a 16-50 or an 18-55, which means there is a 35mm there. Now, what is 35mm for me? And let's get that debate out of the question, because I know a lot of people saying that our vision is around 50mm, 42 to 48mm, I think, something like that. But for me, the 35mm is what I like to see with my eyes. I'm not sure if I do, I don't have the tools to measure everything, but I like to have that kind of field of view with my eyes. And when I'm shooting photography, especially street photography or landscapes, cityscapes or waterscapes or everything that involves a wider frame, this lens, it's what I like the most. And I'm not talking about this one. This is the 35mm f1.8 for the Z mount for Nikon. But any of these ones, this is a 35mm f1.6 from Pergear. Also this one, which is a kit lens, this comes with the Nikon ZFC. It's an, I think, 16-55 or 18-55, something like that. And it does contain the 35mm focal length. I also have an FD version. I also have an MD version for Minolta. And all these lenses are great for me. And let me give you the 5 reasons why is that. And if that, let's say, appeals to you, maybe you're gonna go buy a 35mm lens. This video is not sponsored in any way. I'm not getting paid to tell you what's good and what's bad, and I will never do that. I will always tell you what's good for you, and I will give you my honest opinion about what I'm shooting and how that fits your, let's say, budget and bag. And let's get to it. So first and foremost, it's the versatility. Every lens is a great lens as long as you know the focal length and you get used to it and you know exactly how to frame, how to compose, how to get your shots the way you want it. But the 35mm offers you pretty much everything in terms of framing and composition, and it helps you compose easier or faster because the vision and the wide spectrum of this lens gets more in the shot than other lenses. Now, it's debatable that the 24mm it's better, getting a wider shot as well as an 18 or a 16mm, but this one doesn't distort as much as those ones. Also, this one offers a better sharpness to, let's say, frame ratio, because the wide lenses tend to have softer corners. These ones are a little bit sharper. Now, the choice of this lens, it's up to you. If you want to have a wider aperture lens, let's say on 1.2, which is, I think it's a Nocton from Voigtlander, or if you want to have a 3.5, which I think it's an old lens, an old FD lens, a 3.5 or a Nikon lens, I'm not sure. But it depends on what you're shooting, and if you are going into low light, and if you're shooting at night, or if you're shooting in situations like events when the light is changing fast and you need both wide apertures and narrower apertures, I believe that a 35mm f1.8 will be the great deal for you. The second reason, and this one, it's not necessarily debatable, it's more like a reason that everyone will tell you that 35mm is a great lens, is the fact that they're not big. They are pretty small. They're also not super heavy. Now, it depends on the aperture, and Again, that 1.2 or the 1.4 might be a little bit bigger, a little bit bulkier, a little bit heavier, but they're usually pretty carryable lenses with you all day without putting a lot of weight on your shoulders or on your wrist or anything else. So the form factor is a big deal, especially if you're shooting street photography or events. If you are shooting landscapes or if you're doing hikings, a lens like this will also offer you the portability and the small form factor that everyone is looking for, because it's better to be lighter than heavier. And the more you're weighting yourself with gear, the less proactive in shooting you will be. Because you can get these lenses on any brand, that makes them cheaper. And I'm not talking about dirt cheap, though. This Pergear 35 1.6, it's only 70 bucks. And take it with a grain of salt. What I'm saying right now, it's a bit weird, but it's one of the most desired 35mm in my kit. And I'm repeating, in my kit, because the sharpness that comes out of it, even at 1.6, the fact that you can get closer to objects and shoot, let's say, close-up images, and the form factor, again, it's small, it's very portable, built up out of metal, very solid. So you can get amazing stuff with even smaller lenses and cheaper lenses, but most of these 35mm won't exceed, let's say, a budget of $1,000, depending on, like I said, how wide the aperture is. For me, I think a lens that is between $250, around $550, $600 in 35mm, that focal length and that lens, it's gonna be a suitable lens for any budget, because they're not lenses to shoot specific stuff. They're not niched lenses. They're more like a wide range of subjects lens and carry all day lens. So that is a great option if you are looking to buy a 35mm lens. Because we mentioned before the sharpness of this little one, I'm gonna say that the fact that the lens is sharp and the 35mm doesn't involve a lot of distortion compensation, it doesn't involve that much of a chromatic aberrations, especially the ones that they're not super wide like 1.2 and 1.4. I believe that the fact that you can get a 35mm and just shoot JPEGs straight out of the camera without thinking of, like I said, all the corrections that you need. And you can put these lenses on basically any camera, including the DSLRs and the SLRs, like this Minolta X700. This is great, and most of the 35mm are pretty well corrected already. And like I said, because it's not a very hard lens to build for manufacturers, they don't do a lot of coatings and they don't need to do a lot of coatings. These lenses are pretty sharp. Their bokeh rendition is pretty good, or bokeh. It's a lens that you will enjoy nonetheless, especially if you are shooting, let's say, portraits, when you really need to get rid of that chromatic aberration. Most of them don't have it. Now it depends. For example, this kit lens that comes with the ZFC, it's not amazing, and because it comes with a camera and you're only paying $150, $200 more, and it is a lens that provides a long, or a zoom focal length, a long focal length from the 16 to 55 or 18 to 55. It's not amazing in terms of aberrations, in terms of corrections. But these days, these cameras that we're buying, either if it's an APS-C or a full frame, even the Micro Four Thirds cameras, it doesn't matter if they're aimed towards pro photographers or just the prosumers, the amateur and intermediate photographers. They do have that software that can correct chromatic aberrations as well as distortion. So I don't see a point in talking about that when it comes to 35, which for me right now, it seems like a good buy, and being able to not edit the photos and dabble and get into the nitty gritty of editing and removing the chromatic aberrations and do the distortion and everything else. this is a great buy again because of that. And the last one, which is a bit subjective, especially for those of you who are not shooting or didn't shoot in the past. These lenses, the 35mm lenses, especially the old ones, like this MD 35mm f2.8 on the X700, they do have a special look, which some call character. And that character might be suited for, let's say, portraits or street photography or events, depending on the situation that you're shooting. And if you are able to put up with other, problems that the older one had, like, say, chromatic aberration or not enough coating to deal with the flare, and those things might be art for some and might be, bad things for others. But the fact that you can find these 35mm dirty cheap from old systems like Pentax, as well as Olympus, as well as Nikon old f-mount lenses, that's a great thing. You will be able to find one for $50, probably $100. And the character and the colors that are providing are amazing, are warm and soft and beautiful. Even the bokeh is different than these clinical sharp lenses that we have these days. So these are pretty much the reasons why you should buy a 35 and why I should have more than I already do. And I will probably buy more. Guys, again, thank you so much for watching this video. Hopefully you got something out of it and made you decide if you were thinking about the 35mm lens. Even if you're buying a kit lens that has a 35mm and lock it on 35 and shoot everything there, you will improve your photography with a frame that it pretty much covers our vision, and you'll learn more if you are stuck with one focal length that is, again, pretty reliable. Thank you for giving these videos likes, and thank you for being here and supporting me all day. Don't forget to give it a thumbs up. Stay focused, my friends. I will definitely see you in a bit.